What's it feel like for you? I mean, I don't know how old you are, but where's your Trek theater experience, and how did that influence your passion for the franchise?
Well, the funny thing was, I was, when I was first watching Star Trek, um, I was at a babysitter's house. This was, it was in reruns, of course, and it came on right after school,
Hmm.
about a half hour or so after school. Got there, and there was a rule: you had to take a nap after school or watch Star Trek.
Oh, that's an easy choice, man. That's easy. If they made you watch, if it was nap or soap opera, I'd be sleeping. But nap and Trek, Trek all day.
At that point, the first time, it's like, well, I don't know what it is, but okay, better than a nap. And then, of course, after that, it's like, yeah, Star Trek. There
That's
wasn't even
awesome.
a question.
You had a
And
cool babysitter. Just so we're clear, you had a really cool babysitter. That's awesome.
absolutely, after about a week, she didn't even ask.
That's great. That is so
So
awesome.
that's really where I first got my first taste of Star Trek and love of the franchise. Um, and since then, it's just grown
Sure, sure. I
until recently, of course. But
Yeah, Wrath of Khan was the first one I saw in the theater. I do remember a lot about. I have sort of like that. You know, I'm getting older, so I have this vague memory of the motion picture. So I don't
hmm
really remember seeing it in the theater, but back then the dollar theater stuff existed. So it would have been like the next year, it would have been in the dollar theaters. So I think that's probably more likely where I saw a motion picture. But Wrath of Khan was an event, and Mom knew about what happened to Spock, and we were there like from the get go. Mom had to be a part of it. So I remember seeing that, and to this day, it's just I go right back to that place. It's just so awesome. So the other ones, the joke was right for many years, right? It's the every other movie, so it was the even ones were good and the odd ones were not, and it's kind of like, well, there are parts of all of it. I think there's pros and cons. How do you sort of like, I don't want to say rank, but how do you sort of place, some of them for you?
well, okay. For example, for me, uh, Wrath of Khan, The Search for Spock, and The Voyage Home is a trilogy.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's a complete story, and yeah, one and five are not as good as the rest, but they're still better than modern Star Trek. Um, and
Yeah, we'll get to modern Star Trek because I definitely
I've yet to
checked
see
out.
the director's cut, which I want to
Okay.
see
Mhm.
of the motion picture, the new director's cut that's come out. I want to see that, um, because I've seen the trailers for it, and it's like, holy crap, that looks much better than it did way back when.
Sure, sure. Yeah, Ryan says Star Trek 1966 to 2005. A lot of folks agree with you,
Yep.
Ryan. A lot of folks agree with you. And again, not being a Trekkie and having an affinity and dabbling with. So even with Next Generation for me, I remember watching it and being a fan of it to a certain extent. But again, no
hmm
recall. If you ask me like a favorite episode, I got nothing. I can kind of describe certain moments that I would consider favorites, but Next Gen did such a good job because to me it flipped the narrative where you had sort of like Captain Kirk, the warrior, and they're trying to like create peace and prosperity and diplomacy. And then when you go to Next Generation, it was so great because it's almost like you had this quiet, perfect stereotype of like, the I want to say I almost said bureaucrat. I mean diplomat, I guess. I kind of repeated the same word, but a diplomat in these like terrible conflicts. And I thought it was such a great, that's a very broad generalization. And if you can correct me if I'm totally off base, but that's how I always saw it. So I always
Okay.
felt
Yeah.
like it was such a great, like a companion. It made like such a great companion series because they just added to each other. They
Right.
complemented each other so much. But then we fast forward beyond that and we start to end into sort of like for me, a lot of Wild Wild West stuff that didn't make sense. It didn't add up. And the new stuff, the brand new stuff, I'm not. No, I'm no part of any of that. So you can kind of take me through where I'm off base with the original sort of OG and TNG, and then before we get to the brand new stuff, you can kind of break down what your thoughts on some of that is.
Well, excuse me. With the original series, I like the fact that it was you had these episodes which told complete stories. They were so well
Mm,
written. You had this feeling like you were a part of this universe that just it felt real.
mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
the episode where uh, they encounter Abraham Lincoln. You can imagine Abe Lincoln actually being there, even though
Right.
you know in your mind this is an actor. It's not actually Abe Lincoln, but you could, the way it's written. This is how Abe Lincoln would have behaved. Is you know
True.
what it comes across as, where there's thought and development. Things were thought out, planned out. Um, and when something happened, it was just they remembered, they kept notes, it continued on,
Right.
and it was done much the same way in the other Trek series that are 2005 it would be the end of it. But as far as because obviously the first episode of Next Generation, you had McCoy in there, and he was actually the tie-in between the two
Right.
series.
The bridge. Yep.
Bridge, yeah, and it was so I don't know. I don't want to
Always
say
feel like
exciting, but
it was
go
like
ahead.
passing of a baton, right?
Yes, it was.
McCoy got to be the one to pass the baton, and I want to touch on the history elements because I think for me, and again, I was very young during some of this time as well. It made me curious about Abraham Lincoln. It made me curious about the Wild West. It made me curious about some of the stuff they would touch on. There's the crime story of where like they're toting Tommy guns, and you're like, it just made me curious. And I think that some of that's been lost. We've replaced curiosity and interesting narrative with agenda and the message, to quote Critical Drinker.
Hmm.
Um, so you agree, like passing of the baton kind of helped tie it all together into like almost like a bigger franchise instead of it being two completely separate universes.
Yes,
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
and the fact that they had respect for it.
sure.
You had Spock on, you had Scotty on. Um, it was you had a feeling that this was still, even though things changed, they were still the same. It was still Star Trek. It was still Starfleet. Yeah,
Right.
there were things that changed over the years. Of course, everything changes over the years, and I think that's necessary. You know, uh, there are, and I know we're going to get into this a little bit more later,
Mhm.
but there are people that will tell me, well, you don't like the new stuff because you don't like change. No, I love change. I would love to see, and see that's the other thing. One of the other things that they're not changing anything except
Right.
what has already happened,
Yep. Yep. Ryan
retelling
says.
old stories.
Yeah, Ryan says, in my view, Star Trek was believable sci-fi. Amen to that, brother. Something that humanity could reach, something that could inspire us, and that was until 2009 onwards. Yeah, and I agree with that so much, that sentiment, Ryan, because I always felt that as I got older and was rewatching a lot of it, and I've rewatched it, here, as an adult and a bigger fan now, you see a lot more of the depth in the writing of the original series and TNG and some of that kind of stuff, and it does. It does. It definitely always felt like we could be on a path where we could kind of behave this way and try to express this morals and good intentions and and we can come together and try to figure out how to overcome hurdles and have different opinions and treat everyone equal. And so let's transition a little bit to what you and Ryan are both alluding to here, the 2005 to 2009 window when things started to kind of like go off the tracks. Does it go off the tracks immediately after TNG, or what are your thoughts on how things sort of diverge?
Well, after TNG, things just kind of developed. You went into DS9, which was totally different because
Mhm.
obviously it was on a space station. You didn't have a starship there to begin with. The Defiant didn't come into the picture until later. So, you were basically, with the exception of the shuttlecraft, excuse me, you didn't have any. It was everything took place on the station. Things were coming to the station, and that was different. There were people that didn't like that. They wanted a starship. Well, they got it finally. Um, but one of the things with DS9, it actually started off strong because it had a lot of its base laid out from TNG.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then you went on to Voyager, which was basically, in my opinion, a better retelling of the original series. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they were out in the middle of nowhere where, you know, I can imagine some of the things Kirk and Spock wouldn't have done, but some of the things they would have. Um, and the adventures of coming back home. Um, but after that, even though I liked Enterprise, I would say that's really where it started to go off until towards the end.
Right.
Really, seasons 3 and 4 were really where it started feeling more like Star Trek again,
Does
in
any of
my
this
opinion.
correlate to Roddenberry's passing?
Roddenberry passed during TNG.
Okay, so it's pretty early on. So the impact on Deep Space Nine and Voyager, it was still like they were still carrying the water properly and still paying reasonable homage to
Mm-hmm.
the old material. And I agree with some of that. I didn't see a lot of that either, but I agree with that too. The sentiment wasn't lost. People would have different fan favorites and things like that. What happens when we get into this new stuff with Discovery and now Picard and all the stuff that happens now? I almost feel like I'm being trolled. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, I just feel like, and again, I'm feeling for the Trek fans, like, you're just being trolled.
Well, there was something that I happened to see on Twitter today. Um, you know, if the writing, people are so focused on, well, who's acting in this, who's doing this, and that they're more interested in knowing who is hired to write, because if you've got a good writer, you're going to have, you can make any actor better based on good material.
Right.
If they can act, you can help them act better. But if you don't give them good material,
Right.
they can only go so far.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. Ryan's very active in our chat. He's saying, in my view, TNG and Deep Space Nine was great. Voyager was good. Enterprise was average. Star Trek needed a
Mm-hmm.
break by 2005, but Enterprise is way better than Discovery and Picard. It should not have been canceled. So, yeah, and it's funny how now we're in streaming. So, I think that, and I don't even know who to give credit to first when they came up with the concept that these streaming services are just content for the sake of content. I don't know if Paramount's just mimicking Disney in that way or what. It just seems very cheap to me. Um, it just the inexperienced writers that you were talking about. They're hiring people. I don't know. Do the Trek writers have? Because when let me back up and say, when I did the full breakdown of Loki, because obviously that was the one. I know WandaVision had come and gone. People, had mixed feelings about some of it. I didn't think it went off the rails until the end, where you had last couple episodes with Agatha and whatever. But when Loki it was garbage to me from day one. Like I was like, this is a mess. And I did a deep dive where I was like, these writers have no credits, no credentials, and they're getting like this massive job. Is part of the problem that Paramount just went on the cheap with the writing staff, or is it just the message? I mean, I don't know.
A lot of it is if you look into the writers, again, as you said, they have no writing credits. They have, you know, or the ones they do have, they worked on a soap opera or they worked on NCIS or whatever.
Yeah, like one
Where
episode. Like Loki was like 2 episodes of Rick and Morty, and they get a Marvel job. You're like, you gotta be what? Like that doesn't make sense. So yeah, they hire soap writers to write Trek. That just I don't know. We
and anyone who actually said they liked Star Trek, don't know. You're not involved. Go away.
wow, wow. Well, some of them
Because
are coming out and admitting that truth, right? We had the I don't know all their names. They're to me they're interchangeable, so it doesn't really matter, right? So you have the one that got the Star Wars gig, and she admitted that she had writers that hadn't even seen the original trilogy. You have what Jack Schaefer, I think is the name, where she was like, I didn't even know who Mephisto was, so I started doing press. But that's basically the basis of the story that we told. She didn't even know who Mephisto was. So obviously, when all the fans were thinking all these crazy theories, she didn't. So it's permeating all of pop culture. Where basically, it's like we're all getting in the same lifeboats. It's like every franchise. All right, come on, folks. There's room for the Trek folks. Come on in now. It's gonna be your turn. And now it's like okay, because now we're moving on to the Halo. I've been covering Halo with Stone Loki and Ryan some, and now we got Ironcaster in the mix. We're just like piling on the Halo, uh, train wreck. And it seems like Trek was so ahead of the curve with this in some ways. I'm trying to figure out the chicken and the egg of who's copying who here with
well,
the
it was funny because there were people, you know, the 2009 movie and then Beyond and whatever um, came out, and I'm going, oh Lord. I did see 2009, by the way. I couldn't stand it. I didn't see the other two.
Okay. So
Um,
2009 is the one you're referring to, the first one, just called Star Trek. With
yeah, it's just on
this is the
Star
Chris
Trek.
Pine, Zachary Quinto, and all that. Okay,
Hmm.
gotcha. I'm following.
I couldn't stand it. It's like it was too flashy, too many. Um, what do they call those things? Um,
Well, the CGI stuff was just so overwhelming. For me, I got to be honest. I saw it. I didn't hate it, but I felt like the time travel storyline stuff was just a cheat. I just couldn't stand that. I'm like, you're just cheating. Like you're just cheating. And then I've ranted and raved about the second one, the whole Wrath of Khan lie that came out of J.J. Abrams' mouth. I'll never forgive him because I was like literally writing pop culture Google News for websites, and I remember writing that story. Remember we had screenshots that were getting leaked about Klingons on set, and he's just bold faced lying about everything. And then he bold faced lied about Khan, and I'm like, if you had just been honest, we wouldn't have gone into this with a different perspective. We wouldn't have more excited to at least give you a chance to create a new. And actually, I think if they had used the terms like multiverse and stuff back then, fans would have. Some fans, again, I'm not saying diehard Star Trek fans, but some would have been at least okay. This isn't really canon. This is like its own little universe. All right, well, we can just go along for the ride and have Star Trek for the sake of having it.
and if they had come out and said, okay, this is a different universe,
Right.
completely different universe. We're not even okay, but that was not exactly. It was
Nope.
alluded to,
Right, but it
but
wasn't the fact because they had the Spock overlay, right? So
yeah,
it wouldn't have been true anyway. Yeah.
but it's like okay, I could deal with that, but anyhow, they had that, and then it's like, oh, he's going to be going to do Star Wars, and it's like, oh shit, not Star Wars next. No, and people were going, yeah, he's gonna make Star Wars good. And I'm going, oh Lord, no, please
Yeah,
don't let him do this.
I know.
People were all excited, and I'm going, no, 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 this is gonna be garbage. And I believe I'm correct. I think it's called garbage.
Oh, and I remember having this with my son coming out of after last because he checked out at Last Jedi like immediately was done, and I was like, I saw it in a critic screening, and there was no applause. There's no sound. No one really claps or it was just weird. I kind of felt like, what did I just see? Like, I'm so confused. I have all of these things that they're introducing and they're doing that have never been done before. I don't understand. And I remember my take was, because we had one more movie to go, and I kept going, surely they have a plan. It's $1 billion on the line here. We have $1 billion. Surely there's a plan. Like, and I used to fan fiction this with my son because he's like, oh no, you can't save it. I said, well, what if we did this? He's like, all right, well that wouldn't be too bad. Well, what if we did this? Oh, it wouldn't be too bad. So I was always fan fictioning with him because I had faith, I had hope that there was a plan. There was no freaking plan. There's no freaking plan whatsoever. And I don't feel like there was a freaking plan when it came to track. It's just been like one bad writer diarrhea moments in a room somewhere with a whole bunch of writers named Jason. That's how I feel right now.
Well, unfortunately, using the diarrhea thing, it's like the script writers were almost like that, throwing it at the wall if it stuck.
Yeah, yeah,
It was a great idea.
yeah. Jeez. Sorry, man. R.I.P. track, because I can definitely understand the pain going through the Star Wars stuff for me, because it's just now I always get the name of the word. I should probably learn the proper German word. It's called Schadenfreude, where you're just hate watching. You know, it's almost like the car crash, can't look away. That's how a lot of the stuff is for me, and also just being kind of a bridge to the normies. I feel like I'm a good bridge to most of the normies. Too hard for that. So
Yeah. Right? And I'm not playing no